My videos cover a wide variety of topics, and they're basically all centered around the subject of masculinity. And in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you guys what 10 years of marriage taught me about communication as a man. All right, so let's get straight into it. But before I do, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. If you've already subscribed, thank you. I appreciate you. Shout outs to you. So let's get straight into it. So my wife and I recently celebrated our 10-year wedding anniversary, and that's definitely a blessing. I'm glad that we made it to 10 years. I'm so thankful for her as my wife. All right. So what being married for 10 years taught me about myself as a man in regards to communication, being married. So the very first thing that comes to mind is communicating openly, okay? Not holding things in, but as soon as things pop up, there may be a disagreement, or there may be something that I'm thinking about, to not bottle that up, to not hold that in. That's one of the things that being married for 10 years so far has taught me about communication as a man. Just being more willing to openly express how I feel, or certain questions that I have as a husband. Because before, my wife will tell you, my communication wasn't the best. Maybe it's still not the best now. I'm just coming from my perspective. But anyway, one thing that I really needed to work on was communicating in an open fashion, communicating in a way that is clear and precise and provides clarity. Because a lot of times things would happen and I would take them in. I observe a lot of things, and a lot of times I don't say things, just in life in general, not just with my wife or whatever. But it was a lot of times where I would be feeling things, okay, and I would want to express things, but what I would do, I would just hold it in. I wouldn't say nothing. All right. And then, of course, my wife can sense that, if that, especially if it's something in regards to a disagreement or something. Women have their ways of discerning certain things like that. So she'll ask me, she'll be like, "Man, everything okay?" I'm like, yeah, everything is fine. Everything is good, And I'm thinking as a man that I'm just coming off with a straight face, like, "Oh yeah, everything is fine. Everything is good." But she can sense that everything is not. And I'm thinking from her perspective, she's looking at me like, "Yo, like, what's wrong with this dude, man? This dude, okay, obviously something is bothering you. And you sitting here talking about everything's fine." And it's obvious based off of your body language and your facial expressions that everything is not fine. Everything is not okay. You have something on your mind that you want to express, or that you want to ask, or you want to get off your chest or whatever, but you ain't saying it though. All right. So that's the number one thing that I learned about communication and marriage, being married for 10 years so far. Because as a man, that's a really bad look, some of the ways that I used to communicate, and I'm an honest guy, and I can admit that, and I'm pretty sure there's some things I need to communicate better with now, but I call myself being a better communicator at least. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of room for improvement still. But you got to imagine as a man, how that looks like. Just imagine that your wife does that, or somebody else does that. They're obviously bothered by something that you've said or done, or whatever, something you didn't say, something you didn't do, and they're just walking around like, "Yeah, everything's okay, yeah," basically pouting, and stuff like that. And sometimes, as a man, sometimes we don't see it from a certain perspective until you place yourself in your wife's shoes sometimes. And you just got to imagine, how would you feel as a man, as a husband, if you ask your wife a certain question and then she responds like that? You're gonna be like, "Okay, what in the world? Obviously it's something wrong. You got a little attitude. You feel some type of way, but you not being bold enough. Your communication isn't good enough to where you're just gonna sit down and, in a controlled manner, say what's going on with you, or say what's on your mind, or speak what's on your mind, so that we can maturely discuss this and have a healthy dialogue on what you think, so we can possibly come to a solution, or at least talk about it and then go from there, But I was more so the type of, okay, nah, I'm gonna hold this in. You know, I'm gonna hold this in. I ain't gonna say nothing. All right, okay. But that ain't the thing to do though. And I discussed. It took me some time within marriage to find out, like, nah, you need to be. If something is bothering me, you have to be able to say that, but in a controlled manner and in a way that promotes an open line of communication between husband and wife, rather than holding it all in. And now something else happens down the line, and now you exploding, on some other stuff. I had to learn that, and just looking back at that and just thinking about some of the ways I used to react and things like that, it's like, man, what in the world? Because again, you try to place yourself in your wife's shoes and imagine that your wife is acting a certain type of way, like how that would make you feel as a man, like, yo, what is going on? Like, I'm clearly asking her, like, what's going on? She don't want to talk. She's pouting and being angry or acting childish or something like that. Because that's basically what that is. Just keeping it real as a man, See, back then I didn't see it like that though. I had to mature, in marriage, but basically it's really just being childish. You know what I'm saying? Like, we've got 3 kids, 4 on the way. And just think about that, even with your kids, that's something that you expect your kids to do. You asking them questions, you're like, okay, why are you acting like this? Blah, 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 whatever. And they're like, they're pouting. And they're acting a certain type of way. That's how you expect kids to act, and sometimes that's how I was, and I'm not proud of that, and that's not good, so that's the main thing that marriage taught me in the 10 years that we've been married, not to bottle things up, not to hold things in. So that's the number one thing. All right. And I'm pretty sure it's a lot more I can say about that, but I'm coming off the dome here. This is not scripted or anything like that. But that's the number one thing. All right. So the second thing that I would say that being married for 10 years taught me about communication as a man is that in the midst of communicating, you don't have to win the fight, because sometimes, not only speak for myself, as a man, I find myself thinking sometimes, like, I want to get my point across, and I want to make sure that she knows that this is my point and that she agrees to this point, okay, and that she understands my point, and that she's understanding what I'm saying. But that's not always the approach. That's really never the approach to take, though. I would more so say that what I've learned with that is just, and it kind of ties back into communication. I would say that what I've learned with that is that as long as you've communicated as a man, as a husband, as a father, what's on your mind, or you've asked the questions, or you've expressed yourself in a clear, controlled manner, that's where the victory is right there. So the victory is not about the reply or the response, from my wife, Not to say that I don't want to come off like she's terrible or something like that. I hope I'm not coming off like that. But it's not about the response from your wife, how she responds to it, or her body language, or whatever else that you can think of. The victory is really in you as a man, me as a man and as a husband, expressing clearly and in a controlled manner things that are on my mind, questions that I have, concerns that I have, so on and so forth. Just getting those things off my chest, and not necessarily giving my wife a piece of my mind or something like that, because that mindset comes from, like I said earlier in this video, bottling things up, holding things in, anger, all those types of things. That's when you get into that whole mode of, all right, now I'm about to give you a piece of my mind. I'm about to go in. Now I've been meaning to say this. Like, yeah, let's go. Now things start getting out of control. And that's not good, So the victory is really in just clearly communicating. So no matter what the response is, whether it's agreeable or disagreeable or whatever, or wherever you deem the body language or the response to be, maybe you feel like it's subpar, like, nah, you gonna listen to me, you better say something back, like you gonna respond this certain type of way, because that approach is it's not fruitful. You know, you have to know mentally in your mind as a man, as you know, as well as I'm really speaking for myself here, but as a man, in the midst of us being married for 10 years, that thought eventually hit my mind like, okay, it's not about winning the conversation. Not that I ever cared about winning it, because I never did. But in a way, it can come off like that, you know, to my wife. Like, okay, he just wants to prove his point. He wants to be right and all those good things. And it's like, I can see how it can come off like that based off of how I'm communicating it, because I'm going into it with the mindset of, I want to be heard. I want this point to be made. And then I want you to be receptive to it, you know, in a healthy manner, at least. You know, I want you to be receptive to it by saying, like, okay, oh, okay. And it's not always like that. You can't expect for somebody to just say, you know, for your wife to just, I can't expect for my wife to just say, like, oh, okay, I understand. Like, okay, I didn't know you meant that. Conversations don't always go like that. You know, that's like a perfect conversation, you know, and even as a husband, you know, it's not like I move like that too. It's not like I'm telling, you know, it's not like if my wife is telling me something or disagreeing with something, that every time I'm gonna be like, you know what? Yeah, you got a point. You right. My bad. I was just totally wrong. I didn't even know you thought about it like that. My bad. All right, let's hug and kiss and move on. Like, you know, it ain't gonna work out like that most of the times. You just know it's not. You know, that's me as a man. You know, just keeping it real. You know, so those are the main two things. You know, just communicating openly, expressing how I feel as a man, as a husband. All right. Asking any questions, anything that may be on my mind, or just expressing any concerns, or just whatever the case may be. You know, you just fill in the blank. Everybody's relationship is different, you know, but just fill in the blank with whatever you want to say, whatever is on your mind or been on your mind, but just, you know, saying it in a controlled manner, but just knowing that the victory is not in how my wife responds, how she responds, or how your wife responds. It's just the victory is in knowing that, okay, you let this be known. All right? Giving her the opportunity to soak it all in, to understand it, to think about it, and then pray about it, of course, and then leave the rest in God's hands. You know, not feeling like you can control the situation, you know, verbally, and you can control the outcome, because the only thing that you can control is what's coming out of your mouth. So if what's coming out of my mouth is hurtful or damaging or non-productive or non-fruitful, it's like, you know, why? But when you have the mindset of, okay, the victory is in just expressing and just talking and just saying how I feel respectfully, and then, you know, seasoning my words with salt, like the Bible tells us to do. That's where the victory is, right there. Because you can't control, you know, how I can't control. I'm sorry, I'm talking like in third person here, but I can't control, you know, how my wife responds and things like that, and I wouldn't want her to think that she can control how I respond. That would be weird, right? But sometimes when we think about, when we put ourselves in someone else's shoes, and our wives' shoes, then we can kind of more so understand, like, oh, I see how this is coming off. I see how this can be, this can come off this type of way. This can come off as mean or inconsiderate or resentful or angry and so on and so forth. Because us as men, we wouldn't want our wives to be talking to us a certain type of way either. So those are the main two things, communication wise, that marriage has taught me over the course of 10 years. So I'm very happy for my wife and I making it to 10 years of marriage. That's definitely a blessing that came really quick. And I'm interested to know what else I'm going to learn in these next 10 years and beyond. You know, and one thing that I would say is that I definitely don't want to be in a place where it's like, okay, I could have did that a whole lot better. I could have did this and that a whole lot better, you know. And nobody's perfect, you know. It's always room for improvement, no matter what, no matter how seasoned or how experienced you are. But I want to be at that point in marriage where it's like, okay, I'm getting ahead of these things before I let them get ahead of me. All right. And what I mean by that is, you know, just certain things, I don't want to get in so deep, you know, making mistakes or, you know, or having certain regrets and things like that. I want to be ahead of it. Like, okay, I want to be the best I can be right now in marriage. I want to be the best I can right now, you know, as a father as well. So that when the 20-year wedding anniversary comes, I'm not making another video like, oh yeah, talking about the same thing, like, you know, that I talked about within the first 10 years, you know, just being ahead of the game and just being on top of that as best as I can. You know, I'm not expecting perfection for myself. Nobody is perfect, you know. But those are the main two things, communication wise, again, because I can talk about a whole bunch of things, but communication wise, those are the main two things that I've learned within 10 years of being married to my wife. All right. So to my wife, if you're watching this, I love you so much, Poo-Poo. Thank you for watching this. I appreciate you. Happy 10-year anniversary to us. I'm looking forward to what's to come in the future. And I'm looking forward to that day too, where you see like, man, you really improved Corey, you really improved on your communication. Because before, oh no, you had me wondering, you know. So that would be great. But yeah, those are the main two things though. So I'm trying to think of other things, but I don't want to make this video way too long because I'm pretty sure it's a lot more things. But communication wise, those are the top two things. You know, just saying what's on my mind in a controlled manner, seasoning my words with salt, like the Bible tells us to do, and then also knowing that it's not about winning. It's just as long as I've expressed what I feel, what I think, questions that I have or concerns or whatever, or disagreements, you know, that's where the victory is. Because once those words come out of my mouth, I can't control my wife. I can't force her to do anything. I can't force her to respond a certain type of way. And she can't force me to respond a certain type of way with things that she tells me. You know, she can't, you know, control me or something. You know, I'm not a robot or something. And she's not a robot. So, you know, just realizing those things, you know. So I hope that you guys, enjoyed this video. I hope that you guys got something from it. I know that I've definitely got something from being married for 10 years. All right. I definitely got something out of that. Definitely learned a lot. Definitely some improvements that I need to make, you know. So feel free to chime in. Let me know what you guys think. Maybe you guys have had some of the same experiences, or you had the same mindset or whatever, or you came to the same conclusion that I did. And maybe it took you some years to realize that. Maybe it took you 10, 15, 20, 50 years, whatever, to figure that out, you know. I'm glad that I figured that out in the midst of this first 10 years. Again, I'm not perfect. I still got some work to do. But yeah, feel free to chime in. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Peace out.